All right, ladies. Hope everybody's having their second good digital day in a row. Hopefully things are a little more smoothly technology-wise than they did yesterday. But today we want to start talking about Congress a little bit. Talking about our legislative branch. Remember the branch that makes our laws, and we're talking about two houses. We've got the House of Representatives and the Senate. We'll talk about that in a second, actually, as we bring up the fact that we do have a bicameral legislature, two houses, again, the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now let's talk for just a couple minutes about why we have a bicameral legislature. First, there are historical reasons. We came from being part of the British Empire, and the British legislative branch, Parliament, had a House of Lords and a House of Commons. They had a bicameral legislature. And most of the individual states by this point of the United States did as well. So it made sense in that way to continue that tradition. But it was also practical. Remember those compromises we talked about back in Unit 1? We talked about the Virginia plan favored by the big states, and we talked about the New Jersey plan favored by the small states, and the Great Compromise, or the Connecticut Compromise in between. Well, the way to compromise between the big states and the small states was to have one chamber of Congress that each of them would prefer. So the small states actually like the Senate, the big states actually like the House of Representatives, so it was practical to compromise in that way also. And then there are theoretical reasons. The House and the Senate are not exactly the same. The rules for the House and the Senate are not exactly the same, so they approach things in slightly different ways. And you can think of that as an extension of checks and balances, because remember, they both have to sign off. They both have to pass a bill before it can become a law. So it makes a lot of sense to, again, not put all of the power in one place. A term of Congress. We get what we would call a new Congress every 2 years. A term of Congress is 2 years, and the current term is called the 114th Congress. So we've had 113 full 2-year terms, and we're now on the 114th 2-year term of Congress. That doesn't mean that all members of Congress are new every 2 years, but there are some new members after we've had some elections, so we declare it a new term of Congress. A session of Congress is the time every year when they actually get together in Washington and they conduct their business. They try to pass laws and do all of the other things that they're charged with doing. There are 2 sessions of Congress in each term, meaning there's basically a period of time each year when Congress is in session, and there's a period of time each year when Congress is not in session. When they're not in session, they adjourn. You've probably heard that term related to maybe a court case before. And it's just simply the situation that Congress is not in session at certain times. And for a lot of that time, the members of Congress may go home to the states that they actually represent so that they can interact with the people that they actually represent. Now, there are these scheduled sessions of Congress each year, but it's important to note that the President of the United States may also call a special session of Congress. If there's an emergency situation that needs to be dealt with, a budget crisis or something like that, the President of the United States can call Congress into session at any time that he chooses. He can't force them to do anything, but he can call them into a special session of Congress. Now let's talk about those 2 different houses of Congress individually, and we're going to start with what's known as the lower house, the House of Representatives, which currently has a total of 435 members. There are 435 seats available in the House of Representatives. But remember that the seats are apportioned. Basically, a portion of them is handed out to each state. That's what that means, based on how many people live in that state, the population of each state. So we know that the total is going to be 435. The question is, how big is your population? How big a share of that 435 do you get? And we've talked about examples. A large state like California might have more than 50. Texas has more than 30. Kentucky has 6. There are 2 states, Wyoming and I believe Vermont, that only have 1 seat in the House of Representatives, just based on their population. Now that can change. We know that the populations of states can shift around as people are born and die and move around. So every 10 years we go through a process of what's called reapportionment. That means the seats are redistributed. So a state might, if the population is shifted significantly enough, gain or lose a seat. So reapportionment is when seats are redistributed every 10 years after an event that we call the census. And the census is basically where forms are sent out all over the country, and you register, and the population is counted, and demographic information is taken down. So we have the census. We go through the process of reapportionment. Kentucky has been pretty consistent at its 6 members of the House of Representatives for a while, but theoretically, when we have our next census, we could gain a seat up to 7. We could lose a seat down to 5. And the census, by the way, just for your information, always takes place when the year ends in 0. So we had one in 2010. The next one will be in the year 2020. Now, here's what else happens every couple of years with regard to the House of Representatives is redistricting. And that is, I'll give you the definition here. Redistricting, the process of redrawing where district boundaries are after the census. I'll say it one more time. The process of redrawing where district boundaries are after the census. And I actually want to skip down here for a second and show you what I mean. This is Kentucky, and these are our current districts for the House of Representatives. You can see them here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. We are right here, the smallest one. That's Jefferson County right there in the orange. That's our district. It's District 3. Each district elects its own member to Congress. So we only vote for the person who represents District 3. In District 2, they only vote for the person who represents District 2, and so on. And we each have our own representative in the House. The Senate works a little differently, but that's how it works in the House. So those lines can also be redrawn. If the population shifts around the state, we can actually redraw the lines of how the districts fall as well. Members of the House of Representatives serve 2-year terms, which kind of means they're almost always running for office. The fact that there are no term limits also, you can be in Congress for a long time. But again, you're constantly running for office. You know how long these campaigns can stretch out. And again, you're basically always running because you serve this very short 2-year term. Election day, by the way, federal elections always take place in even-numbered years. Federal elections in even-numbered years. And they happen on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I know that sounds kind of weird. I'll say it again. The first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. So basically, it's the first Tuesday in November, unless November 1st is a Tuesday. It's the first Tuesday that falls between November 2nd and November 8th. There were actually some historic reasons for that. We don't need to get into the details. There are reasons that don't really matter anymore, but they keep it that way out of tradition. And by the way, you probably know that we elect a president every 4 years. We did it in 2012. We'll do it again in 2016. But there are congressional elections, elections for Congress, in every even-numbered year, even in 2014 and 2016, 2014 and 2018, when we're not electing a president. We call those types of elections off-year elections. So there are still federal elections, elections at the national level. We are simply not electing a president in that year. Now, I actually already mentioned what was going on with this concept of single-member districts. That's just the residents of each district vote for their own representative to the House of Representatives. And we'll go back to this map for a second to show you what I mean. Again, we're right here in District 3. We only get to vote for the person who represents District 3. There are 5 other people representing Kentucky in the House of Representatives. We don't get to vote for any of them. We only vote for the person who represents our district. And the same is true of each of these other districts here as well. They only vote for the person who represents their district, and that person only represents their district when he or she gets to Congress. Now, you might be wondering, okay, so who draws these lines? Who decides how these districts are lined up? Well, the answer is the government of each state gets to make that decision and draw their lines for themselves, which is fine unless someone starts to abuse that privilege. And we know that that does happen from time to time. It's difficult to prove, and it's not legal, but we know that it still does happen. And this is what we call gerrymandering. If whatever political party is in power, and let's say, for example, that right now, it doesn't even matter which party actually. We'll say Party A is in power in Kentucky, and that party realizes, you know what? if we redrew these districts in a slightly different way, I bet we could get a few more of our people elected to Congress. So we're going to draw it in a way that is an advantage to our party, and that's what we call gerrymandering. It's illegal. We're actually going to do a little exercise where we sort of take a look at how that might be done in class. But it's illegally drawing the lines of a district just for the purpose of favoring one political party, either the Democrats or the Republicans, over the other party. Let's talk very quickly about the qualifications for serving in Congress, and we're going to start with the House of Representatives, the lower house. And in that picture there's former President Bill Clinton with the guy who currently represents our district, District 3 of Kentucky, in the House of Representatives. His name is John Yarmouth, famous before he went into Congress as being the guy who founded the Leo newspaper magazine, if you ever see that. But the qualifications, according to the Constitution, for being in the House of Representatives, you must be at least 25 years old. You must have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years. You don't have to have been born a U.S. citizen, but you must be a U.S. citizen, and you must have been one for at least 7 years before you're elected to Congress. And you do actually have to live in the state from which you are elected. You can't, for example, live in Kentucky but represent Indiana in Congress. It doesn't work that way. You have to live in the state where you are elected to represent. All right, I'm actually not going to spend a ton of time on this right here, but there are certain factors that can influence elections. Things like, which party does a candidate belong to? One party, might be more popular in one area of the country than the other. Right now, the Republicans are very popular in the South, but if you go to the Northeast, you find a lot of popularity for the Democrats there. Gender can make a difference. Some people might be more willing to vote for either a male or female candidate. The amount of experience. Some people might want somebody who's more experienced. Somebody might want somebody who's fresh and has new ideas. If you've got, if your name is already known or your family name is already known, that can help you. And also, are you the incumbent? And what that means is, are you the person already holding the office? We know that incumbents, the person already holding the office, tends to have an advantage in an election. And of course, it can sometimes come down to how much money you have or how much money you can raise for your campaign as well. So just some of the factors that can influence elections in Congress. Okay, now we're looking specifically at the Senate, what we call the upper house sometimes, and that is actually the current sort of leader of the Senate, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky. We'll talk about him a little more as the unit goes on. The Senate currently has 100 members, and that's just because there are 2 from each state. There are 50 states, each one gets 2 senators, so there are 100 members of the U.S. Senate right now. So 2 senators from each state. Now, they weren't always elected by the people. They used to be actually appointed by the legislature of each state, the government of each state. That was changed with the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Senators are now elected by the people, just like representatives and lots of other government officials are. Now, they do serve much longer terms. They serve big, long 6-year terms in the Senate. Although it's not like we're electing all of the senators every 6 years. It's about 1/3 of them is elected every 2 years. So they're staggered. And again, just like in the House of Representatives, there are no term limits. And the fact that not all of them are up for election every 2 years means that it's a continuous body. There are always members that were in the Senate before. It's not like you're ever going to get an entirely new Senate all at the same time. All right, to finish this up here, because it's going to cut me off in a minute anyway, it cuts me off in 15 minutes. Let's look at the constitutional requirements. This is what the Constitution says about being a senator. It's a little, higher requirements than for being in the House of Representatives. First of all, you must be at least 30 years old. Remember, it was 25 for the House. It's 30 in the Senate. Again, you have to be a U.S. citizen, but it's a little longer. It's 9 years. You must be a U.S. citizen for 9 years in order to serve in the Senate. It was only 7 years in the House of Representatives, but it is 9 years when we're talking about the United States Senate. And again, just like in the House, you must actually live in the state that you have been elected to represent. So you can pause this video or go back and listen to whatever you want, but I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys whenever we get back to school.